All right, before we get started with this week's show, I just want to mention that we do have a brand new sponsor to My Nerd World, the Star Wars podcast, and that is Mack Weldon. Go to MackWeldon.com. I have a special promo code, the special offer for you a little bit later on in the show that I will tell you about. But if you happen to be near a computer while you're listening to this week's show, listen to the show and browse Mack Weldon and MackWeldon.com's website. That way you're all ready to order and take advantage of this amazing My Nerd World MackWeldon.com deal. All right, let's get to the show.
You're after something. Is it revenge? Money? Or is it something else? You look good. A little rough around the edges, but good.
Heard about a job. Big shot gangster putting together crew.
I'm a driver, and I'm a flyer. I waited a long time for a shot like this. What do you think? Well, what do you know?
You got a line on a ship?
Yeah, I know a guy. He's the best smuggler around.
I heard a story about you. I was wondering if it's true.
Everything you've heard about me is true.
L3!
Let go of the mean man's face.
Who are these guys?
If you come with us, you're in this life for good.
You might want to buckle up, baby.
Here they come! Let me give you some advice. Assume everyone will betray you, and you will never be disappointed.
I got a really good feeling about this.
Since when do you know how to fly?
190 years old? You look great.
Push it!
So glad we took this job!
And welcome to episode number 139 of the My Nerd World, a Star Wars podcast. I am your host, Jon Justice, and I had the pleasure of watching Solo: A Star Wars Story not once, but twice this week for free. I flew to Washington, D.C. With the rest of my show cohorts to do the show live from our nation's capital. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and thankfully, to Delta, the in-flight entertainment included Solo: A Star Wars Story, and it timed out the flight, like, perfectly, so I watched it on the flight out, and I watched it on the flight back. So, I've fallen in love with this film. I want to talk a little bit about that, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about falling in love with Star Wars this week. Also on the show this week, like I mentioned, we do have some new sponsor news. I have a little bit more to share with you about the project that I keep teasing. We'll also get to the What Loose Ends should be tied up in episode 9. We'll include that with my thoughts and a bunch of listener feedback this week that we need to get to. First off, though, I want to talk about falling in love with Star Wars. I came to this conclusion the first time on the flight out watching Solo: A Star Wars Story. I've mentioned over the course of the past few weeks that I've really been wanting to watch this movie again. I think it's partly because I didn't see it as many times as I did The Last Jedi, The Force Awakens, or even Rogue One in theaters. I think I tapped out on The Force Awakens 12 times. I think I saw Last Jedi 9. And really, the only reason why I didn't see the Last Jedi as many times was that extra half hour Like, I don't have any problem with that extra half hour of the film at all. I think the movie's fine the way that it is. Like, you know how much of a masterpiece I feel like that film is. But that extra half hour, when you're going and seeing it multiple times in the theater, I mean, that adds up. So that's probably the only reason why I didn't see it as many times as The Force Awakens, because I like it more than that movie. Rogue One, I think I saw 6 times. And Solo, I think I saw 4, maybe 5 in the theater. But I'd really been wanting to watch it again. And initially, I'm done ranking movies. I've mentioned this before, because it's a moving target. But of the 2 spinoff films, I thought that, you know what? I mean, I really liked Solo, but I really thought that maybe Rogue One I enjoyed more. Watching it on the flight out. And I thought maybe it was the anticipation of having not seen it in a while, but then it was confirmed for me when I watched it again on the flight home 2 days later. But watching it on the flight out, I realized I really am starting to love this movie. And saw some things in Solo, A Star Wars Story, and looked at it through a different lens, much in the same way that I've done many times with The Last Jedi. And that's when it occurred to me, and I actually told the guy that I worked with. I said, you know, for me, I end up falling in love with these movies. You like them to start, right? Like any relationship. You're attracted to somebody. Usually it's for physical reasons, and you know, for the way they look, not physical reasons, but, you know, usually it's a they catch your eye kind of thing. And then you get to know them, and then you end up eventually, you know, sort of falling in love and happily ever after, and this kind of thing. And you can look at Star Wars kind of the same way. I mean, we all get sort of presented to Star Wars. We like the way it looks via the trailers, and then we have a different reaction when we actually go on the date, right? We go to the theater to go see it. But for me, these movies really do certain movies of the series really do end up growing on me, and I end up coming to love them. And that's been the case for Solo: A Star Wars Story. And the one thing that stuck out on the viewing on the flight out, and then was reinforced on the viewing on the flight home, was how much I started gravitating towards the Han and Kira relationship. And it's probably partly due to this project that I've been teasing about and working on. I'll let you in on the secret, since more people are aware of it now. I've written a novel. I'm not yet ready to give you all the details yet, except to say that it's in the space opera genre. But I had an idea several years ago for a story. And if you've listened to the show, if you've been a fan of the show for long enough, you could probably, if you wanted to, read between the lines, because I've talked a lot about George Lucas and how George Lucas ruined it for everybody else who wanted to go and create a world like he did. Right? He took the fantasy, sci-fi, and placed it in a galaxy far, far away, which allowed him to make up all these rules. And anybody that goes and tries to do that is simply copying what George did. George kind of took that ability away. So if you make space operas, in my opinion, you can't do what George did, because George has already done it in the best way possible. So you have to look at other ways of doing it. And that's kind of the starting point from where my story idea came from. And so I'm in the process right now of editing it. It will also be an audiobook. And within the next few weeks, I'll be able to give you the synopsis and of what the book's about. But that's what the project has been, and I'm really, really excited to be able to share it with you. But a part of that story is a male and female relationship. So watching Solo: A Star Wars Story, I really began to appreciate that relationship with Han and Kira, and how different it is from so many other stories that we see. The closest thing that I can kind of compare it to is another recent film that I absolutely adore, and that's Ready Player One. And I adore that movie for much of the same reason. I love that dynamic between Parzival and Artemis, between Wade and Samantha. I love that relationship because it's a little bit unconventional. We dispense with the does she or doesn't she? It's a little bit there, right, in Ready Player One, but in Solo it's not. And that's what I really love about it. is that when we meet Han and Kira in Solo: A Star Wars Story, they're already in a relationship, right? Han's already in love with her, and arguably Kira is too. And you immediately get the vibe within the first opening scenes of the film. You lock into these two. If you can picture them together, and by the time you get to the end of that opening act, where they get separated, you really, at least for me, I can really feel Han's pain at trying to get this woman that he loves off of Corellia, and then he's cut off from her. And I love the fact that the movie doesn't go with the typical sort of tropes. Kira doesn't hold him responsible, which really is, in my opinion, incredibly endearing of that character, and makes it even more heartbreaking at the end, spoiler alert, when she doesn't go with him. But the whole crux of the beginning of the film, with Han joining the Academy and hooking up with Tobias Beckett and going through and risking what he was going through, it was all because motivated by, even 3 years later, his desire to get back to Corellia, to the woman that he loves, and then coming face to face with her after all those years. I really began to appreciate that movie on a whole different level. And that's when I told my buddy, I'm like, man, I just end up falling in love with these films. And it's funny because the guy I work with, Drew, he goes, yeah, that's probably why you're so willing to accept all their flaws. And he had made a really good point. That's absolutely true. When you're truly deeply, I truly deeply love you before you die, I want you to know, when you truly deeply do love somebody, you accept them there, because nobody's perfect. You accept them for their flaws, but you love them for everything else, right? And Star Wars gives so much. That's why I love this franchise. I love this universe. That's why I love coming and doing the show every week, to talk to you for 45 minutes to, an hour and a half about this, galaxy far, far away. It offers so much. And so I can't, it was funny because when I almost didn't watch it on the plane. I almost didn't watch Solo on the plane. And the reason why is because I know that within a week or so, we've got the digital release coming out, and then we have the movie coming out. And so I knew that I would have my hands on it soon. I'm like, man, do I really want to watch it on this tiny screen in the seat back, on the seat back, for the chair in front of me on this flight 2.5 hour flight to DC. And I was like, yeah, why not? Why not? Yeah, I've been wanting to watch this movie for weeks now, for months now since it left the theater. Yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. And I'm so glad that I did. And now I'm desperate to watch it again, right? Because when you fall in love with something, you want to spend time with it, right? And that's really what it is. For the people that don't like The Last Jedi, they just all had a bunch of really bad first dates. Sometimes you need to go on that second date just to make sure that you really did hate it as much as you did the first time. So I wanted to share that with you. And, we've talked about Solo before on the show, although, not as much as we have The Force Awakens, and certainly not the Last Jedi. And I really liked the movie when I saw it in theaters, but I wasn't over the moon for it. And I'm starting to become over the moon for it. They're watching it on the plane. I wanted to make sure that I didn't stop it at all, because I wanted to watch the whole thing before the plane landed. So I can't wait to see it again. So as always, if you want to comment and share your thoughts, you can drop me an email, talkshownerd at gmail.com. All right, let's move on.
There has been an awakening.
Oh, you know what? I played something.
Have you felt it?
And it was supposed to play for you, but unfortunately it didn't. So let's try that again. Let's move on.
There has been an awakening.
There we go.
Have you felt it?
All right. So the topic that I gave to you for last week was what loose ends should be tied up in Star Wars Episode 9. Are there haves and must-haves for you for Episode 9? So we're going to roll this into sort of the listener feedback portion of the show, because I have a lot of listener feedback this week. And as you know, if you listened last week, I wanted to save this for kind of the core topic. So I'm going to share my thoughts of what they could do, because we know that this Episode 9 Star Wars film is supposed to tie in the entire saga. I'm going to give you a few of my thoughts, throw a few of my suggestions out there, and then we're basically going to run through as much of the listener feedback as we can for the remainder of this week's show. So looking at my own personal list of Episode 9 must-haves or good or good considerations, good ideas and considerations if we're tying all this entire series together. The first on my list, and these are in no particular order, except to say that this was my instinctive reaction when I went to make my list of wrapping up and tying in the entire saga in 9. But the first on my list was, I wrote down Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I added to that, is Ben Solo being named Ben? Is that enough? Here you have a character in Obi-Wan Kenobi that was so critical that we actually meet him. He is the first character that we meet that lasts all 6 original trilogy films. We meet Qui-Gon Jinn and we meet, Obi-Wan Kenobi at the beginning of The Phantom Menace. And spoiler alert, Qui-Gon Jinn doesn't make it to the end. So if you're going to tie the series together, I think Obi-Wan Kenobi is a really good place to start. Now, how do you utilize that? I do not know. I mean, the obvious thing is going back to the whole Rey story. If you really have to have Rey related to somebody, that's an easy tie-in. But I will say that Ben being named Ben is obviously named after Ben, Ben Kenobi. We do hear Kenobi in The Force Awakens, so he does have a presence there. We've really only been focusing on the big 3 of legacy characters. We will be having, Lando coming back in 9. But again, Lando coming in 9 really only ties back to the original trilogy. That doesn't go all the way back to the prequel trilogy. Anakin Skywalker, okay? Is the Vader inspiration enough, considering 1 through 6 was essentially his story? Okay. And I think that's why so many people have brought up the importance of the Force Ghost, right? That's why so many people have mentioned that and commented on, we need an Anakin Force Ghost. So we know that in The Force Awakens, the Ben Solo, that Kylo Ren was trying to, right, I will finish what you started, grandfather. So his presence is there, but his presence is not there. The other one, and there's a couple more here, is Palpatine. Okay. Do we need a direct tie into Palpatine in some way, shape, or form? And again, I don't know how you do that, but I'm basically focusing on these 3 characters because these 3 characters, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker, and Palpatine, right? Darth Sidious. These were all characters that dominated the first 6 films, and yet we've had very little presence, verbally or certainly otherwise, in 7 and 8. So if you were going to tie it all in, that would be a good starting point. A couple more things on here. We will mention Padme. I'm on board with a lot of people who I've heard comment about how they would like to see Padme Amidala somehow make an impact in the sequel trilogy, and I am absolutely on board with that. What that is, I don't know. I don't think this is true at all, by the way, but I really like there's the theories out there that she faked her death. I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's going to happen. But if they didn't, I'm here to tell you that I would not be adverse to that. I think that would be pretty darn awesome if somehow an elder, I don't know, I haven't done the math on it, but an elder Padme Amidala ended up showing up and knowing that going back to the Revenge of the Sith, that was actually a faking of her death. And like I said, I don't think it's going to happen. I just think it would be cool. And I haven't thought enough about it to begin to break down how it completely couldn't work. So, if you were looking to send me a lengthy email about how it couldn't, how how it wouldn't work, feel free to, but understand I also haven't worked out enough to even know whether or not that would be possible. The last thing I'll say is this, and this is an interesting one, and I've talked about this at length before, and mostly prior to when The Last Jedi came out, and that is the idea of the prophecy and the virgin birth. And I mentioned this going back to before The Last Jedi, as I said, before The Last Jedi came out, is that I really did like the idea that we get a better telling of the virgin birth and the prophecy. I like the idea that it could potentially be more like the Matrix. For those that don't know, in the Matrix there was one chosen out of the Matrix, didn't fit, and that would be the person that would try to go and lead the rebellion against the machines. But it turned out there was a lot of these Neos. There was the prophecy. There were multiple ones. Neo just happened to be the one to pull it off. So I like the idea that in order for the universe to maintain balance, the Force keeps reaching out to individuals to become the next chosen one to keep things balanced. I also think that's a really good way to work out at the end of this film that if we do get Reylo coming together, if we have this mindset that this is what the Force has been doing, and Ben Solo and Rey, nobody finally figured out the magic, and these two actually were compatible, and it did bring balance to the Force because it brought the light and the dark side together, I think that wraps it up nicely. So a revisiting of the prophecy, I think, would also be a very, very good way to tie in the entire saga from 1 to 9. But as I've been asking, I've been wanting to hear from you. And so with that, we're going to get to the listener feedback portion of this week's show.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, before we move on to the next part of today's show, I want to take a moment and talk about Mack Weldon and MackWeldon.com. I can't tell you how excited I was when Mack Weldon contacted the show to let me know that, hey, you know what? We want to help sponsor your show, and we're going to offer your listeners an amazing offer with a promo code. I'm going to give you that promo code in just a minute. But the reason why I was so excited is because I purchased Mack Weldon. I didn't realize how important it was when it comes to how you feel in the clothes you wear. And I know that sounds dumb, but, you know, I'm a T-shirt guy. But I didn't realize what a big difference it made when you actually wear great T-shirts. And that's what Mack Weldon has to offer. Now, look, it's not just T-shirts. I'm talking undershirts, right? Underwear, socks. They've got amazing. I love their socks. I'm so off of the plain, white socks. Mack Weldon has amazing socks. Shirts, undershirts, hoodies, sweatpants. They have a wide assortment of accessories as well. And Mack Weldon believes in smart design, and that's clear in the quality of their products. Premium fabrics, simple shopping. The website is clean, it's simple. You go, you click, you choose, you buy. It's that simple. They're so confident, by the way, right? They want you to be comfortable. And they are so confident in what they offer that if you don't like the first pair of what you order, you can keep it. And they're still going to refund you. No questions asked. So what I want you to do is I want you to go to MackWeldon.com. Okay, that is MackWeldon.com. MackWeldon. Go to MackWeldon.com and enter the promo code MNW for My Nerd World. MNW. Enter that promo code at checkout, and you're going to get 20% off your first order. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. And even if there isn't anything on the website particularly for you, this is a really good opportunity to buy some great, amazing products from a fantastic company for the ones that you love, especially with the holidays coming up. So go to MackWeldon.com, check out what they have to offer, and again, use the promo code MNW at the checkout, and you're going to get 20% off your first order. Again, that's MackWeldon.com. I'm wearing a Mack Weldon shirt right now, and the podcast is better for it. Trust me. So using the email from talkshownerd@gmail.com, also the comments from YouTube, we got a bunch of listener feedback. And remember, too, if you're sitting by the computer while we go through the show this week, go on to MackWeldon.com and do some shopping while you listen to my dulcet tones talk about Star Wars. All right. So first listener comment comes from NJ Clemens. The one thing I want to see resolved is Ben's fate, whether live or die. I do not want something ambiguous for him. I hope JJ can commit to a definitive ending. And I'm really, really hoping for a redeemed and alive Ben heading off to Naboo with Rey to start their new Jedi camp for Force sensitives and their beautiful Reylo babies. All right, thank you for the comment, MJ. I really do appreciate it. All right, Petra writes this. Hi, John. Great and positive show as always. Thank you, Petra. Love the name. Something that I think is important in regards to wrapping up the Skywalker saga is the theme of family. In Episode 1, a mother and her son were separated, as Shmi believed she was doing what was best for Anakin by letting him go to become a great Jedi. In Episode 7, we learned that Leia made a similar decision in regards to Ben. It would be very meaningful to see that son returning home to his mother. We don't know how the footage of Carrie will be utilized, so sadly we may not see what could have been one of the most emotional moments in a Star Wars film ever. But it may be a metaphorical or spiritual sense. Maybe Rey brings Ben to see his mother's burial tomb if she's already passed. I would love to see that mother-son arc completed in a beautiful way. On a side note, since you're a big Depeche Mode fan, I was thinking it would be a great Reylo DM song and thought of two. Somebody and Home. Ooh. Yeah, now you're hitting all the feels there, Petra. They are very Ben and Rey. Keep up the great work, John. I'll add another one to that. I Am You. As a matter of fact, Petra, I'm gonna see your Somebody Depeche Mode song and Home. And I'm going to raise you I Am You from the underrated Depeche Mode album Exciter. If you are, it's one of my favorite Depeche Mode songs. And it's tackling one of the themes that I love, and that is, that tension between love and being caught in a trap with somebody, and I absolutely dig that. So I Am You is a great one. And since she's got me down this musical road, I haven't mentioned this in a long, long time, but I'll mention it now. When you get a chance, and it may not be everybody's cup of tea, okay? If I ever have the opportunity to interview Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails, I will ask him. I swear I will ask him this. From the Downward Spiral, which is arguably one of the greatest albums ever made. That album is just absolutely fantastic. I can't talk enough about how great that album is. And again, not everybody's cup of tea. But the song on that album called The Becoming, it's written about Anakin Skywalker. There's even a line in the song that says, "Annie, hold me a little tighter. I'm slipping away." Right, and I'm paraphrasing. But listen, if you get a chance, just Google the lyrics and read them. That song is so written about Anakin Skywalker, it's not even funny. So thank you for the comment there, Petra. All right, Ben Davis writes this. I'm really hoping for a happy ending for the remaining members of the Skywalker family. Yeah, I am. I agree with that. Pretty simple, straight to the point. Let's see. Black-eyed Lily said, "So glad to hear someone support Kathleen Kennedy. Yes, she deserves it. She does not deserve all the hate that she's been getting by any stretch of the imagination." All right, let's get to the next email. Angie, you know what? She told me how to say her name, and now I totally need to apologize because I forgot. I think she said Angie. It's Agnieszka, but I'm saying that wrong. So my apologies because I forgot the shortened version that you told me. Anyways, they write this. "Thanks as always for the show. I am now a Star Wars expert in my milieu thanks to you. No one else is a Star Wars fan, and I am a newbie, so your knowledge is important. My kids started watching Clone Wars animated, and I really wish the Resistance was already here for us. This series is still too complicated and too dark for young kids 5 to 7. The Rebels will be even worse. I noticed that Star Wars content has little to offer younger kids, so I really hope they will make more than just the Resistance. I will say this, if you have not shown your 5 to 7-year-olds Rebels, I totally think you can. I can understand you thinking, I can understand Clone Wars, but, and I know that every family's different, right? I mean, my 11-year-old still can't do Lord of the Rings. It's way too intense for him. But I've known 8-year-olds that have watched Lord of the Rings. But I'll just say that if you haven't watched Rebels with them, I would go and check that out. Suddenly, I got really excited about Episode 9 when I heard about the guerrilla approach in your last podcast. I get absolutely bored with big space battles. Sorry, no need to apologize. And I hope for more Mission Impossible-like action with J.J.'s directing style. Go, shoot, and smile makes a perfect match for this type of movie. And I'm not sure he could have come up with a great space battle. On the bad guy's side, I think we've got Hux, and this pretty much is enough. He's a snake-like figure, right, reminiscent of those from Harry Potter, from Lord of the Rings, and she mentions Lord of the Rings here, Wormtongue. The more we laughed at him in The Last Jedi, Hux, the more vengeance he will come back with. Wasn't Hitler looking funny and like a total idiot when you look at him speaking in Nuremberg? I also think that we need more Force-sensitive bad guys. My main expectation for 9 is to dispense of that nonsensical notion that the Force is about bloodline. The Jedi did not have children, so the Force-sensitive children were not children of the Jedi or Sith. I understand that Anakin's children were an exception, though through which we learned that the Force can be passed genetically. Still, the main way someone was Force-sensitive was because he or she was born this way through the will of the Force. It is hard for us to imagine because we are so dermatistic in our views of the world through genetics, but we should allow some magic in the fairy tale. By the way, I was thinking that we might have Mark Hamill not as a Force ghost, but paired with Kerry Russell as his wife in a scene showing an alternate life of Luke. Remember, one from the novelization of The Last Jedi. That's an interesting thought. Thank you for the email. All right, let's get to Alex Shippers writes this. My title for Episode 9, From Darkness to Light. The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, From Darkness to Light. Interesting. All right. Thanks for the comment. Let's get to Carla Jo Guthrie. Let's see. I was a weekend behind and just listened to this podcast. So she's referring to Episode 9 news and leaks nostalgic moments. I think the Dark Side Cave shows Rey this truth. We all create ourselves. In her case, especially. It didn't answer her question at all because she already knew the answer. It told her the truth that she already believed. She created herself from every choice she made her whole life. Let's see. Just like the rest of us, I kind of lean toward her actually being someone other than a drunkard's child, but it doesn't matter. She's an incredible character because she did create herself. And I think the narrative in the cave was the conversation between Ben and Rey. All right. Let's get to the next one. Rupert writes this. Best title I've heard so far is Star Wars: A Spark of Hope, right? The phrase The Last Jedi was in The Force Awakens crawl, and The Spark of Hope was in The Last Jedi crawl, plus it echoes A New Hope, the film that startles it all. I like your logic. It makes sense. Although if you were going to ask me, I'm going to tell you that more than likely that it'll probably be named something different, because I don't know anybody that's ever actually guessed the right title for a movie yet, for a Star Wars movie. All right. Let's get to a friend of the show, Jennifer Oliver, writes this. I wonder if JJ will wrap up the one of the major themes in Star Wars. Sovereignty, who rules, and do they have the right to rule? Lucas was obviously very big on government and politics in the prequels, and some disliked it. Even though some were irritated with that aspect of the prequels, no one can deny that the entire saga, books and canon included, has hung upon who is ruling and how, and that the Skywalkers have always been tied up into it. Will the Star Wars universe decide a democracy is the best rule for a galaxy far, far away? Padme thought so. Of course, she also witnessed democracy dying with thunderous applause. Leia thought so too. However, even in Bloodline, the Senate had separatists and centrists that argued and created gridlock at times. And democracy in that environment led to a first senator and later the First Order. On the other hand, Anakin, the first Skywalker, even before going over to the dark side when he was with Padme in Naboo's Lake Country, thought that there should be a central ruler who would force decisions, perhaps a benevolent dictator. He later killed a dictator, the Emperor. Now, Jennifer goes on in her email to make a bunch of really great points, but because of time and the other comments we need to get to, I'm going to skip towards the end here. The entire Star Wars universe has always involved the spiritual side in rulership. And since the Skywalkers began, since Episode 1, they have always been involved passionately with government. I'm glad I'm not JJ. I think he has the toughest job, especially following that masterpiece, The Last Jedi. Not that it's a competition between him and Rian Johnson, but it will be a very tough act to follow and to follow up on. As always, thank you so much for the commentary and thoughts there, Jennifer. I appreciate it. Zach writes this. A title that I'm hoping for. Episode 9 is Resolve of the Gray. It would bring the Wills into a more mainstream consciousness, possibly foreshadow what will happen with Ben and Rey, and continue the theme of the other trilogy's finales. Return marketing positive ending. Revenge marketing the negative ending, and Resolve would mark a neutral but solid ending. Yeah, it's interesting when you say that, because it's one of the things I wonder with the title. Because you don't want to, and I mentioned this when we talked about the title either last week or the week before, that, it's tough because you don't want to end on a negative note with the title of the movie, right? Like The Last Jedi would have been a great title for an episode, for episode 9. So I would love to be a fly on the wall for the discussions of the title of episode 9. If they are indeed having a hard time with it, it could be a situation where, like, Rian Johnson kind of had the title in his head all along. All right, so going back to the Nostalgic Scenes podcast from a few weeks ago, Bonnie Fisher wrote in and wanted to share with you a few of her thoughts. Her favorite scenes from The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens that she believes will stand the test of time. Kylo and Rey interrogation scene, Kylo and Han death scene, even shades Return of the Jedi. Kylo, Finn, Rey lightsaber fight on Starkiller. A Leia and Han conversation about Ben regarding the influence of Snoke. Maz speaking to Rey, how the belonging she is seeking may be in front of her, not behind her. TFA scenes that may be more important after 9. Lor Santeca and Kylo conversation at the opening of The Force Awakens basically spells out the entire sequel trilogy if Ben is redeemed. Rey finding the lightsaber and all the visions, since so few were used in The Last Jedi, the scene does not carry too much weight now, may be very important after 9. Things I loved in TFA may not qualify as memorable to the test of time. Kylo Ren's descent from the ramp, first screen time. Han and Chewie's arrival on the Falcon, right? Chewie were home. Rey's flying off of Jakku. Bridal carry of Rey onto First Order shuttle, as Han looks on. Every time Kylo takes out a computer console with his lightsaber. Hug between Leia and Rey on Resistance base. Rey passing lightsaber to Luke. Sad powered down R2-D2 in the corner of the base. On the flip side, R2-D2's help with the radar map later in the movie. And let's do one more here from Bonnie's email. From The Last Jedi, she writes, the throne room scene, obviously. All the Force Bond scenes. The use of Kurosawa's Rashomon technique regarding the last night Ben spends on at the Jedi Academy. Kylo and Luke's battle on Crate. Yoda and Luke scene about failure. Rose's impacting Finn's flyer to save him and telling Finn that we will win by saving what we love. Snoke berating Kylo about having much of his father in him, split you to the bone, child in a mask. One thing about the email that Bonnie wrote that really stuck out to me was how many iconic moments there are in these first 2 movies of this sequel trilogy, right? Especially Rian Johnson's, man. The Last Jedi, just every single scene is just crafted so well. All right, Victoria writes this. You mentioned that the photos don't show Rey, Finn, and Poe. These were the behind-the-scenes photos from the episode 137. I think Rey will definitely go off on her own. In my opinion, she must in order to complete her journey and to find her belonging, whatever that may be. If I were to guess, she will start the movie with her adopted Resistance family, but then leave. I have to admit, albeit grudgingly, that the opposite could be true. Also, I don't know if you saw yet, but Girls with Sabers YouTube channel pointed out some interesting things about Poe's outfit, possibly reflecting not so nice Disney character. It may be nothing, but I found it intriguing. Yeah, I think they were pointing it to Gaston, right? If I'm not I'm not mistaken, right? I think they were pointing to Gaston. I'll have to go back and listen. I do really enjoy that podcast quite a bit. All right, Mitzi K writes this in episode 2, in regards to episode number 137. I think that the Dark Side Cave didn't lie, especially since in Rey's memories, she's known all along who her parents were. She was just protecting her younger self's fragile psyche from the truth she couldn't handle facing until she was older. And I think her narrative throughout the scene is her talking to Ben about it. Thanks for another great podcast. Well, and thank you for the email. I appreciate it. And we'll wrap up on friend of the show, Aunt Vesuvi. Says, thanks, John. It's interesting to contemplate nostalgia and how it has the possibility to either lift or sink a new experience. Again, this is in regards to episode number 137, episode 9, News and Leaks Nostalgic Moments. For episode 9, since you asked for specific moments, I could possibly ramble on all day if given the leeway. But for me, the moment when Rey steps towards Kylo in the elevator of the Supremacy. So this would be episode 8. My bad. Sorry. For episode 8. Heading upward to Snoke's throne room, saying, I'll help you. That strikes a chord with me all the way to my core. Also, when they start contending with the Praetorian guards, and Rey leans backward against Kylo as he functions as a fulcrum, and without even looking, her hand reaches to steady herself by grasping his thigh. The way they function as a unit, I find phenomenally conveyed and very, very poignant. Okay, maybe I'm gonna back up a little bit in her commentary here. Aunt Vesuvi writes this. It just so happens The Last Jedi was the closest to perfection from my point of view, but just as The Empire Strikes Back is so beloved because it built on the events and characterizations of A New Hope and left room for the wild possibilities that ended up being Return of the Jedi, so it is with The Last Jedi. It's a crux. It couldn't exist without The Force Awakens, and someday it'll never be able to be seen without the context of the resolution to come in 9. That's a bunch of great points. Thank you so much as well. Thank you to everybody who's written in, by the way. talkshownerd@gmail.com. You can also find the show on Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbean, and iTunes, along with YouTube, and you can leave a comment on YouTube as well. I'll take a quick moment and remind you again, Mac Weldon and MacWeldon.com. Use the promo code MNW to get 20% off your first order. Buy something for yourself. Treat yourself. Purchase something for a loved one with the holidays coming up. Help support the podcast. It would really mean a lot to me. I'm excited to have the sponsorship on board. Also, everybody who's written in and asked to be on the mailing list for the upcoming project, you are on the list. Thank you, everybody who has. If you haven't, then drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com, and I will put you on the email list. You will be the first ones to receive all the details about the science fiction space opera novel that I have written, along with the audiobook that's coming too. There's a lot of different facets that I've been really hard at work on in this multimedia project, and I really cannot tell you how excited I am to be able to share it with you, and hope that you check this podcast out every week. I hope that you end up enjoying this story as much as I did telling it. And myself and my wife and others have all been hard at work getting it down to perfection, so we can get it released sometime in November. So if you want to be the first ones to get all the details on this multimedia project, drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com. And for everybody who has so far, you're already on the list. So that wraps up this week, an episode number, what are we on? 138, 139? I think it's 139. Hold on. I don't have it in front of me. I have to look in my book. And I know you're screaming at the thing going, it's 139. Episode number 139. I really do appreciate it. And I can't wait. I'm really excited. We'll wrap up on this. I'm really excited for the release of Solo: A Star Wars Story, so we can go back and have some conversations about that. I'm very curious to see if any of you end up experiencing the same thing that I did. If it was a movie that you just enjoyed but didn't find a real connection to, I'm curious if you end up finding that, because I was very, very surprised this week after watching the film to find a connection with that movie, considering how it doesn't have any of the Force elements or the deep mythology in it. And I think that's a testament to the filmmakers. So we'll talk to you again next week. Again, MacWeldon.com, promo code MNW.
The Force will be with you. Always.
My Nerd World.